thank you for inviting me here, and thanks to CII. I know there are at least 2 people and maybe 3 people from 3M who are sitting right in front of me, so I have to be really careful about what I say. But just a small correction, my journey in innovation started 24 years ago, and that was after I finished my PhD in polymer science in the US, and I joined a company called Rogers Corporation. And I was basically a scientist in the R&D, and I was developing technology. And I worked there for 10 years. And then I moved back to India because I wanted to be in India. And then after I came to India, 3M took me. So I'll answer your last question first as to why 3M chose me. I don't think it was much of a mystery. I had spent, I have a PhD in polymers. 3M is essentially a polymer company. I had been doing new product development, innovation, and a lot of new product introduction methodology. That was when this was 2007, and 3M was transitioning from being a trading, maybe a little bit of a localization of global products, to trying to solve for India, to see, hey, can we sell more products that solve the problems in India, and hence we can grow as a company. And so that's really when I came in, and so my credentials, my education experience were a perfect match. So I spent the first couple of years really on that, the change in the culture of the company in terms of how do you become more innovative, how do you solve for your local problems, as well as setting up the new product process methodology in terms of doing product development right. I did that for a couple of years, and then the NPI processes were moved into the respective businesses, and I was asked to set up the healthcare R&D and the healthcare NPI team. So, so in the 6 years, and just coming to the second question in terms of success, I would say it's a mixed bag. Early years saw a lot of success. There are great examples, at least in the 6 years that I was there, and some of it had been accomplished before, and I'm sure they continued that later after I left. But in the 6 years, we introduced a number of products that were specific to India, right? Some interesting examples. One was a minimally wetting upholstery cleaner. This was for the car care business. Customers would bring in their car for the treatment, and 3M had a range of chemicals for treatment. But when they came to pick up the car, the seats would still be wet, right? And they would be uncomfortable about it, and it would also develop a smell. So we developed something that would dry much faster. Similarly, on the roads at night, because we don't have proper reflective material in the paints and things like that, we developed median markers that went in the center, and I'm sure you've seen that all across the roads of Bangalore, and that was something that my team worked on. Similarly, in the healthcare space, we worked on a number of antiseptic and disinfectant chemicals to prevent infection in the hospitals. So there was a long, successful run of product developments, but they were very incremental. And where I believe we turned from being very successful to not so much as when fundamental core technology development was needed, new platforms had to be developed, and a tremendous amount of money had to be invested. And now I'll switch out of 3M and just talk more generally about India Inc. And my information is a little outdated because I've been out of the innovation space for about 8 years since I took on a business role. But what I observed then, not only for me, but a number of people I knew who worked in the various R&Ds across India, and people who were focusing on intellectual property, the feeling was that Indian companies were too risk averse to really take the big leap. And the Indian subsidiaries of global companies depended too much on global approvals for everything. So what happened was, when you had a large enough opportunity which required maybe some risk taking, a lot of investment, people got a little worried. And that was one of the problems. And so I think, in fact, if you ask me, we don't have too many things in the material space. Maybe in the IT sector we've seen more, but too many innovations in the material space where it has been an India for India product and has been hugely successful. There are examples, but it should be a lot more for the number of years we've been investing into R&D and product development and innovation in India. Lastly, I think the price sensitivity of the market has always been a big challenge for global companies to come and introduce new technologies and new products to solve India problems. The good news in India is that there is no dearth of problems to solve. There is just so much that one can develop, which is for India, and there are massive volumes. So the demand side is no issue, but the price sensitivity of the market has always been a challenge for most multinational companies. So the answer is it's been a mixed journey, but it was a fantastic journey. I think we introduced a lot of products in the market, and Ramesh is here from 3M, and I know he can vouch for that.
Thank you. Uh, uh, Shweta, as an innovator yourself, mentor to many women and a senior director at Women Who Code, what are your strengths in making you a successful innovator? I know you hold a patent for yourself, and did you ever doubt your capabilities or feared that you would fail?
Hello all, good evening, and good to see so many people around to see the panel discussion of women in innovation. Coming to your question of did I ever fear? I'd be lying if I say no. Obviously, for everyone to when they get started, they have the fear of failure. That is the most common thing, right? Even I started with those kind of things of where I would fear of failure. So of late, what I started realizing was, okay, what would be the cost if I fail? Because in the innovation space, it's not that you will be like being blamed or charged for it, right? If you are able to do it, it's good. So that's how I started small when I started with the innovation. A decade ago, I would sit in the last seats in the conferences where I would sit and listen to people, how they are being able to do all these kind of things. And then I started observing like, what is that something that I am missing over the years? And that gave me the start of innovation. From there, I started presenting in different forums, conferences. Initial days, I started presenting my submissions, which would get rejected. But every rejection gave me a lesson of what is missing, what is that something someone would look for when they are looking for these kind of proposals. And over the time, I started building the interest because whenever I hear of the word patent, I would get goosebumps. So I would think that, okay, I should have at least one. And that's how I started working towards it. So the first idea, when I had put up for the patent, that didn't work. And I got to know like why it doesn't work. So the next time when I started working around it, I ensured to follow at least some simple steps. The very first thing is, what is there in the industry and how are people trying to solve it, right? Understanding the problem is the key of innovation. Many times what happens is, with the excitement that we have, we try to have a solution and we try to build the problem around it, and many times we fail. Rather, look for a problem, what is the real need of the solution, and then try to work around it. So coming to my patent, so if you people are into the tech space of on-prem, there will be the host that will be managed by the virtualization data center. We have seen many of the cases where when the upgrades should happen or when the data center goes down, it would take lots of efforts to bring it back up, and the business are usually getting impacted in a huge way. So I started looking that as a problem. How could this be solved? So the solution that we came up was giving the high availability to the data center so that when one of the data center goes down, there will be the next data center which comes in place of it. And in that way, it resolves the problem. This, when we initially proposed, the feedback was very bad from a couple of the reviewers who gave that, okay, this doesn't fit into the bill. So we started going through all these phases, try to work on the feedback, and that's how finally it was patented. It took about 3 years for the since the time of filing the patent to get it approved. The other interesting aspect which I have felt it has worked out for me is brainstorming with like-minded people. Many times people hesitate that if they discuss with someone, their idea would be stolen. But then what I have observed is when we discuss, it will always enhance and make the chance of winning that idea in a much better way. One of the recent innovation that worked out really well was that I have been trying for radio, which is an internal VMware specific innovation offsite conference, a premium conference. I have been trying for this particular conference for past 8 years. I was working on a research paper for last 3 years, and during 2020, when I was supposed to submit the proposal for 2021 conference, I could not do it because of the COVID situation. Like, I had to go through it. But then I didn't give up. I ensured that I worked towards it and presented in the 2022 submission. And I make sure that whatever is the key thing, right, especially in the innovation, you should know your audience, who the audience are. Are you solving the right kind of problem for them? So I kept my research around the customers, what are the key challenges that they would be facing, and my submission got selected. And the amount of traction that it got, that we were the runner-ups in the conference, and now 8 product teams within the organization have reached out for our solution. So innovation is something that you should do. Like, you should have the perseverance to do it over the years. You should have lots of patience, and you should not give up easily. That will take you longer way in innovation.
Great, thank you. Dr. Sujata, you mentioned a few minutes ago that you were in R&D a few years ago, and subsequently you actually moved to the business space. So what were the similarity or the challenges that you saw moving from one space to the other?
I think R&D and innovation folks make the best business leaders. How many of you in the audience agree? I see a few hands raised. Actually, the first way I will answer the question is, what are the learnings from my innovation part of my career that has been valuable for me as a business leader? And I think what I would say is that, what do you do when you do a PhD, when you do research, when you do product development, when you do innovation, is that you identify a problem, you do a bunch of experiments to collect data, you collect the data, you process the data, and then you make decisions. Either the decision is to go back and do some other experiments, or it is to implement a solution. I think running a business, for all of you who are here, who are part of running businesses, that's really the way it works, except that the challenge is there is so much more ambiguity in what you do, right? So in terms of similarities, I will start with the fact that first and foremost, it is people who matter. It is having talented people to do the work, especially as you grow and you're leading. That's really when, that's to me the most important aspect. And in my career, I have focused on always having a good team. People who are talented and investing into their development and into their career, and that's worked out really well for me. The second similarity, which from my career in innovation and R&D versus business, is customer centricity, and Shweta, I think, just alluded to that as well. In spite of, and really one can ask ourselves the question, what is the difference between an invention and an innovation? And really the invention is about creating something new. Of course, you can patent it or not, but how do you take that and solve a problem? And in order to do that, you have to know what the problems are. So even when I was in R&D and now when I'm running my business, I'm a very outside-in person, and I think that's been a very similar path between being in R&D and being in business. Now, the differences, again, I already mentioned it. I think the ambiguity in R&D, you're very clear about what's your problem, what needs to be done. But when you run a business, things hit you from all over, and you have to balance a whole bunch of things. So you have to balance today's growth and today's profitability with tomorrow's growth and tomorrow's profitability. So I'll just finish off by saying, when I was an innovator, I had a particular strategy of creating my innovations. But as a business person, when I drive innovation, I'm asking for design for cost, design for performance, design for ease of use, design for maintenance, design for quality, design for sustainability. How do you get rid of the products that you develop? So you get it's a lot more holistic, but I do believe that an R&D role, an innovation role, sets you up very well for business. That's my
Thank you.
short answer.
Thank you. That was very interesting. Thanks a lot. Um, Dr. Kushala, you have mentored several, other geologists, I'm sure, in your journey. And do you see that the platform has become much better for the new geologists who are coming in, could be women or otherwise? And do you think that innovation today is more based on commercial success than it was in your days?
Yeah, yeah, indeed. I have mentored many students, taught a lot of students, and they're doing quite well. And some of them are in remote places like Alaska, and I feel very happy when I see girls doing quite well. Unlike my own times, there are many girls who are now in geophysics and geology, and many IITs have women professors as well. So talking about, but you know, the thing is, see, places like IISc offers a platform. Even IITs are good platforms. But one should realize that in this large country, these are just small islands of excellence. There are many people, many talents out there in our villages and other remote areas who occasionally you hear about stories of students doing extremely well, and it becomes a big story because they have come out of a small village and they're doing extremely well. It is because of some teachers who must have given them that motivation and inspiration. So I think the issue is that we need to create more and more islands of excellence so that many people, many of our talents can be really brought out. The second part of the question, whether innovation is all about more about commercial, I would think yes, because these days there is a much dwindling interest in doing basic science, and even the government policies seem to promote orientation towards technological innovation, extensional application-based research, etc., etc. But you know, these have to be actually anchored on basic research. It is basic research that eventually has led to these innovations. So one must not focus overly on this application or innovation. It also must focus on the basic research, which has led to discoveries. Like when you have a COVID kind of a situation, it is basically the basic research. It is the US universities that have come out with the vaccine. So it is a basic research, cannot be ignored. And it has to be communicated to everyone, and it should be instilled in the students that you must do research.
Dr. Kushala, just continuing with another question that I had, I saw from your profile that you have done a lot of research, and a lot of your research was funded by the government. So how important do you think, in terms of government funding that needs to come in for research, especially when it comes to, your field where it's more of education and research and development?
Yeah, actually it's very interesting. When I came back from the US after my PhD, people say I came with an earthquake because I came back in 1993 July, and there was suddenly this earthquake in Kilari, Maharashtra, which was not identified as a place where earthquakes will happen. So suddenly there was a call from the Department of Science and Technology, and they asked both of us to get involved in earthquake science. And we were very fortunate that for the next several years, we were very well funded and we could do a lot of things. But I think today it has changed, because those days I remember there was an earthquake somewhere in Chamoli, this in UP. And with the next day, we had a call from the Department of Science and Technology asking us to immediately go. And those days we were, younger and we cannot fly because the rules won't allow us to fly. So we had to take a train and immediately go to the Chamoli and start working. But today it doesn't happen. It happened up to Nepal earthquake in 2015. So we could actually take the flight and go with all my students. I went to Nepal and then started working there, But today the focus has shifted and there are also much more formalities to get funding, That is a problem. The question was, how do we find but yeah, even about the tsunami. When the tsunami occurred, none of us have ever expected a tsunami to happen in the Indian coast. So it was a very surprising kind of an event, but money was so liberal that so much of things came out. In fact, my student's first thesis, first student's thesis is on the tsunami of 2004. So there was money, and there was I think there was a lot more focus on problems related to science. I think that is reducing these days. So if an earthquake happens some one of these days, I don't know whether I'll have to use my own personal funding to go there and see. We will still go because we always go to earthquake sites because that's our, sort of passion. So we would still go.
Sure.
But
Thank
I think
you.
there won't be any funding for us to go.
Thank you. Shweta, I see from your, you are a part of Women Who Code, and you've been mentoring a lot of women to come back to work. And I remember in my conversation with you, you mentioned that you are this is a very passionate subject to you. What do you, how do you see Women Who Code contributing towards actually growing entrepreneurs in the society?
The first thing is, the key thing what we have to understand here is bring the right kind of women back to the work. Many times it happens, especially in the tech industry, women just drop off, especially post their maternity phase or due to other challenges like taking care of elderly parents and so on and so forth. So with Women Who Code, VMware created this wonderful initiative called VM Inclusion Tara. In the last 3 years, about 20,000 women has taken up this initiative, and about 4,000 women has already returned back to work. So this itself is a big start, where the first step is to bring back the women to the work, right? The next phase is, how do you inspire them to get into the next level of going beyond of their regular deliverable, come out of their comfort zone, create the awareness of what is the key to become an innovator or get into the space of entrepreneurship. So through Women Who Code, we host lots of sessions as part of our monthly meetups, technical workshops, as well as we have this initiative of Grow 360 Degree, where we help them in terms of understanding the leadership aspect, the soft skill aspect, as well as the technical aspects. Along with this, one more key observation what we made was, there are lots of mentorship available in the industry today, but then one of the key aspect is you don't find the technical mentorship, at least for the free of cost. So this is a new initiative that we are trying to bring in, where the passionate women will be mentored with the right kind of leaders so that they grow in their technical career ladder to the next levels. So this has been designed for a 6-month program. So in that way, they get the right kind of guidance towards it. Along with this, as I was mentioning about different initiatives of meetups and the workshops and so on and so forth, in the community itself, we see these days that more and more women are getting into the entrepreneur along with their regular jobs. Like they feel that, okay, they are now fit to get into the entrepreneur level. Not just from the entrepreneurship, there are different opportunities where women are taking up different kind of things like tech blogging, and especially on the emerging technologies like blockchain, machine learning, so on and so forth. It has become the trend, especially with the new gen kids, that they go solve the problem in different hackathons organized by different organizations. They get the funding to implement. I think this is an opportunity where they build the skill of having their own startups, having their own entrepreneur skills. So I see that more and more women are getting into this space, and will surely lead in the upcoming days.
This is rather a generic question. I'll leave it to, if all of you all want to answer or sum up a few of you want to do it. If you're good at what you do, then nothing can stop you from growing up the career ladder. Your take?
So I think the answer will vary a lot depending on who you ask. It's a very, very personal experience. For me, it's absolutely true. I've just simply focused on doing a good job of what I'm doing, being proactive about asking for more to do, making sure I've had the visibility of it, and my career has grown. But one or two experiences like that should not imply that this is what is happening to everybody, because I think workplace discrimination does exist and there are plenty of stories. But what I would say is that I think the kind of company you work for is extremely important. I was fortunate. I've worked for three companies in my life, one in the US named Rogers Corporation, the second was 3M, and the third is Wabtec now. And all three American companies, multinational companies, I think, do better on this front. One, they're obligated to do better. Second, truly the values and principles support it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen in Indian companies. But so my answer is it depends.
Absolutely. I mean, the reason I asked that question was it is very personal, and I think there's a lot for people to share. Would you like to take it up?
Yeah, I am compelled to quote Martin Luther King Jr., who said, if you can't fly, you run. If you can't run, you walk. If you can't walk, you crawl. Whatever you do what you want to do, and you will succeed. So, the thing is, each of us, every one of us have something good in us that we can actually do and we can perform. But the important thing is, you have to be in the right place, right time, and you should also have the right ambience around you to survive. In my own case, I was relocated from a small organization in Trivandrum, a state-funded organization, to IISc when I was 52 years old. So everybody said, are you nuts going to a large organization where you have no experience in teaching, you have no experience in guiding PhDs, and you have only done research, and you are going to this large engineering organization. How are you going to survive? You are an earth scientist. But, so you have to be, I think it was like a challenge that I took. So if you want to do it, you can do it. That is fine. That's what I have done. But it also depends on who is going to identify you and who is going to give you that opportunity. So my take is that everybody can do well, provided they get the right opportunity. And I think it's important for our society to give them that right opportunity. Then they will do very well in whichever is the field. And I think we have to cultivate a culture that every job is really good. Even somebody who is making a homemade puppet is doing a great job. So we have to give that respectability to them and say that you are doing a great job. So they will do very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I agree with what the wonderful inputs were given. Another aspect to look into it is, especially in the tech industry, if you are good at something, it's not just good enough, right? So you have to go beyond. Many times it also happens that you are passionate about something or you want to learn something new and you don't get the opportunity to work on those areas. So should you stop there? No. Always going beyond will always help. For instance, someone who is good at machine learning, is that good enough to be surviving in the industry? No. This is a common question which many of the participants in different forums come and ask me like, hey Shweta, you know what, I'm good at machine learning, but you mentioned upskill, go beyond, explore different technologies, have the horizontal depth understanding as well, not just the vertical depth understanding of the domain. So my answer would always be that how can you be better when compared to a person who is already good at cloud? If a person is good at machine learning and they acquire the skill of cloud, they acquire the skill of IoT, they acquire the skill of security, they will be able to connect the dots across the business problem. And that's how they will be able to deliver in a better way. So just don't think of whatever I'm good at will be good enough, but go beyond to see like how to be a better person.
So again, another generic question. Do you see a dearth of women innovators in India? And what do you think the government or the organizations you work in, or what we women ourselves can do to further the growth of women innovators?
I don't have a statistical response, and I've not been in innovation for a few years,
Right.
pure innovation. But I've been here since morning 10 o'clock. And if you looked at the number of women here compared to the number of men, I think that answers the question.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think there is any dearth of women in any field. When I come to events like this, it's an eye-opener for me that I see so many smart women, and I wonder why I don't see many of them in the mainstream. For example, I am waiting to see the IASC appointing a director, women director, or IITs appointing a woman director. So I feel that there are many people who are extremely talented, but for whatever is the reason, I don't think that they are given the right opportunity. And I'm sure if there are more women in the leadership role, a lot of things will change.
Thank you. Yes, yes, of course.
Just to add a thought that I've always had is, I don't think this is necessarily an intent, malicious reason why there are not enough women. I think it's a base problem. I think there are not enough women in the base. So, women do, if as long as you talk up to college, most colleges I think have about 50% women. And then for various reasons, women drop out. So it also depends on the field. If you go into, I think computer science today, I think have more women. Bio, finance, investment banking, you do find a lot of women. But in some of the hardcore engineering fields, mechanical, electrical, civil engineering, material science, I think there is a base problem. So, and that's, I think it will change over time. And there are things in our circle of control and there are things that are not. But one of the things Shweta alluded to was about women dropping out for various reasons. And I really do think that's something we can all do something about, including everybody in the audience. Most people here are leaders. And I think she talked about bring women back to work programs, and many companies are talking about that. And I think that is definitely a way of solving for this problem.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Surely these things has to be considered, especially from the organization perspective. It's not just the tick mark where people say like, okay, I did this in my organization. Rather, going beyond those aspects, right? For instance, how do you bring the kind of awareness among women about innovation? Showcase more of the role models across. Bring the industry leaders who are doing some of these aspects, and not just ask them to talk about the success stories, ask them to talk about how they overcame their failures. I think those things will inspire more and more women and build that kind of ecosystem within the organization so that we find more women being the innovators.
Thank you. Before I round up, would anybody like to ask any questions? Yes, please do. Please let us know your name.
Yeah,
and
thank
who
you.
want to
I'm
speak.
Rashmi Bhandari, and I come from a college, Sahyadri, and this was very eye-opening, very interesting. I had so many questions, but somehow I'm articulating because there's so many questions running through my head. We have so many faculty who are ladies, but if you see the engineering college scenario, very few. I've hardly come across a woman principal. So my question to you all is, had like when I hear Sujata and Shweta speak, I felt like there was maybe nothing, no bias or whatever, right? You had talent, you had the opportunity, and you worked, right? And it was good for you. So I just want to ask you: had you been a man, or had you not been a woman? So would it have been different? I mean, would you have been at a different league because you're successful, right? But would it have been different if you had been a woman? And the second question, if you had not been a woman, yeah. And the second question is, why are we not roping in more men? We have a women innovation and we have only women. We have a Women's Day and we have it for only women and the men are missing. So many times I think they don't even know what is the challenge. So many organizations are doing it, but I think the men should be roped in a little bit more, or This is just my thought.
So I'm going to answer the second question first before I hand it over to the others. Because why do we have only women on this panel? Because I've been a part of the core committee. I saw that a lot of the other sessions had only men, and that was one of the reasons why we decided to focus on women. As a part of the Chairperson as Indian Women Network, we are actually making a lot of effort to ensure that every program has equal representation. So that's to answer your question. Now I'll hand it over to
You were mentioning about women in innovation, why only women are available even during the Women's Day, right? I think the perception is changing across the organization. You might have heard about the term of men allies supporting women. So these things are becoming more common because otherwise it would end up that the women will have a perception, oh, this is how it works. But knowing the other side of the story is also equally important so that we grow in a better way. And you were mentioning about what if I was not a woman? I don't think that would be the right way to look at. Do you think every man will be able to innovate? No, right? It is all about the thought process. Maybe there is still the kind of bias. I don't deny it completely, but then there should be that kind of thought process among the women as well that they can do better. There is a lot of hesitation. Just to give one of the example, right? Like many times it would happen if you go to a hackathon or a conference, you see more of men around. You hardly see very few women around there, right? So this happened with me also when my idea didn't get selected. Usually what happens, men go and try to find out their buddies who would be interested in hacking, assuming that women can't code. So I started doing this, that I went and asked people that, do you have a spot in your group? I can code. And that changed the perception. People were open to accept me as part of their group, not because I'm a woman, but I can code, right? That is how we have to start thinking, and that is the message that we have to start building for the next gen students.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. I come from Singapore, and it's the same thing in Singapore as well. You often see women on a women's panel. So each one of you has spoken very eloquently about your own journeys, and I don't know why each one of you could not be on the main panel. And that is where I'm coming with, that this idea of compartmentalizing, that this session is only for women, I think that has to change. In fact, I'll give you another extreme example. There was once a conference where it was women entrepreneurs, and I had signed up for that because they didn't know my gender when I was signing up, but when I reached the registration desk, they told me this is for women. I said, yes, I know. And then they told me, they were trying to explain to me that I can't get in. So where I'm going with this is that when we talk about women in innovation or we talk about women in leadership, we need to understand that men are part of the solution. You have to walk with them. It can't be this or that. I mean, it's not a question, it's a statement.
I'll still comment on it. I've been in a number of panel discussion as a panelist, as a woman, so I don't think we are being disinvited to any other panels because we are women. I think, like Nupama said, there were some reasons why this was an all-women panel, but I've also been in a number of Women's Day events and similar women's panel where there were men in the panel. So I think that awareness is there. It's not a necessary a blind spot. And to answer the lady's question, I think at least at my company, every Women's Day involves both the men and the women. I mean, it's an open invitation for everybody to attend. Certainly more women attend, but it's about the problem that you're interested, you attend meetings that you're interested in and not too many men. But I think it is certainly a problem that both have to go together on, because if there is discrimination, it's happening from the side that's not aware. So both men and women improving their awareness is, I think, really key. And if I may take the liberty of answering the first question, because it was an extremely interesting question, is what if you were a man, right? The answer is we don't know, because none of us can do a parallel in time and see how it could have gone differently. But I actually believe that I might have done better because I'm a woman. Because how do you grow? You know, when you grow in a corporation, it's a pyramid. There are the same number of people and lower number of opportunities. So you stand out for a variety of reasons. You stand out for your competence, that you demonstrate over a long period of time, which is a non-negotiable. But you also stand out when they say, hey, a woman has made it to this level, she must be extra strong, she must be extra bright, she must be extra capable. And I think that's helped me. So, I mean, that's my belief. And it also helps to believe that, right? Because then I assume that nobody is discriminating against me, and I keep my power within myself, and I'm not giving it to anybody else.
Yeah. So I just want to add on to that. We often talk about, like Indra Nooyi says, women can't have it all. So there is always you as an individual, there is your family, and there is your career. So each one of you, have you ever felt a time when you had to compromise on one of these, and which one gets compromised? You, the self, the family, or the work?
Yeah, it's a question that most of us often face. When people, when I received my Women's Award, I wanted to comment on that anyway, so I'll just use it for a minute to mention that. So I was given the first Women's Scientist Award by the Earth Science Ministry, and my first feeling was, why is it that I am not given an award for my work? Why, I can compete with any of my peers and I'll still become eligible for this award. So I quietly asked one of the committee members that why am I get selected for this Women's Award? Then they said it is because you may have less competition, because there are very few women who have. And I said, no, I like to compete in the general mode. So this is the sort of, this is the mindset that women have to be treated slightly differently. So that is one thing. So after the award, a lot of people ask me, how do you manage to work as, the family, and how do you compromise and all that? So, the women out here, all of you are younger than me. So I can take the liberty to say that I represent a much older generation of women. When we were raised in families where there is a patriarchal system going on, male dominated, males are given more importance. So people like me and many of my peers, my generation of women were raised in traditional families where we are generally trained to take a seat back and compromise and move on. Okay, but some of us got the opportunity. We are on the sort of a transition that we also became professionals. So now we have to deal with a professional environment where we are supposed to be equal and argue with them and we show that equal footing. Personally, my challenge was mostly that, because I work in a very male-dominated kind of a profession. So at home, you have to sort of become a little backseat because you're expected to be the traditional wife and traditional daughter-in-law and traditional mother and all that. So coming to the question of compromise, you do make compromises because, traditionally in every system, women have to take a larger role in running the kitchen and taking care of the children and all that. Like if you have a daughter, mothers generally take a leave and then, they stay with the daughter and things like that. So we do have to do that. But, if I tell this to my younger generation, my students and all, they say that you are just, you are too traditional. I mean, this is too traditional. So it is true that, today's generation of youngsters, they work in a different environment and they don't have to struggle so much working at home. You have, much more conveniences. So you always have sort of help, and men have also changed their attitudes. So they also have gone abroad, like my son who studied in the US and worked in the US. He also goes to cook. He asked me, Amma, you sit there, I'll cook. So the attitudes are changing. But we do make compromises. And the important thing is that, we have to sort of understand that this is an environment where we make compromises and move on. So I think we do make compromises, but one should not become grumpy about the compromise. One has to take it as a pleasure. Life becomes much more easier if you see it as a pleasure.
I had you would like to. Thank you. Very interesting session. I think, some of the takeaways that I had was, you be a pathfinder to know that women actually go out of their, their comfort zones, the fact that they have to take the sacrifices and not be grumpy about it. I mean, there's a lot more that we can talk about, a very inspiring session for me. A wonderful meeting you ladies. And I would like to thank the audience for patiently listening to us. Your presence has been a motivation to us. Would also like to thank Dr. Kushala Rajendran, Dr. Sujata Narayan and Shweta for taking off their valuable time and sharing their experiences. I'm sure I had a very good session. I'm sure that's the same with the others. Thank you so much.